The law of nature formulation of the categorical imperative states, act only according to that maxim, whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. In this video, we're going to break that down. But the first thing to note is that you may see this formula written in different ways in different books, and that really just comes down to translation. So I've gone with the one that is easier for me to remember. Firstly, what is a maxim? So a maxim is just a general principle or rule upon which we act. It contains the action one is proposing to do and the circumstances in which the action takes place. So if you decide to exercise because you're feeling stressed, we can express that as the maxim, I will exercise whenever I feel stressed. And we can do that for any action. And it doesn't mean that whenever we go to do something, we consciously have some maxim in mind, right, that we're acting on. It just means that when we decide to do something, when we decide to act, we could, in theory, we can always express that as a maxim. Now we get to the willing bit. So act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. And when you will something, it's basically just like conceiving of it being done. And when we are willing that the maxim becomes universal law, what we are doing is we're universalizing the maxim. Basically, we are imagining everyone doing it as if it is a law of nature. So the formula of the law of nature creates a test. In short, when we are morally deliberating, we formulate a maxim, then we see if we could will that that maxim become a universal law, that is, that everyone does it. If we can, the action is morally permissible. If we can't will that it would become, the maxim become universal, then the action is morally forbidden. Now, this is not a claim about universal consequences. So Kant doesn't care about consequences, it's all about reason. If we want to lie whenever we want, a maxim becomes everyone can lie whenever they want to. We are not imagining the consequences of a world in which everybody lies whenever they want. What we want to know if willing the maxim universally is contrary to reason. There are two ways in which a universal maxim can be contrary to reason: the contradiction in conception and the contradiction in the will. So if a maxim is a contradiction of either of those kinds, it's morally forbidden. So a contradiction in conception occurs when one wills to bring something about that in its very conception is self-contradictory. So if I intend to draw a four-sided triangle, for example, I'm conceiving of something entirely self-contradictory. Therefore, my willing is contrary to reason. I cannot will something that can't even be conceived, so it's a contradiction in conception. A contradiction in the will occurs when there is a conflict between different actions or ends that one wills. So imagine that I go to school, and imagine that I intend to walk to school with you tomorrow. So imagine also that I don't like someone else and they're called Fred. And it's not that I don't like Fred, it's that we don't really get on, it's a bit awkward. So I will to never walk to school with Fred. It's too awkward. Now imagine that you are walking with Fred tomorrow to school. So now I'm guilty of inconsistent willing. I haven't meant to be, but I am, because I've willed both to walk with you tomorrow and to not walk with you in the virtue of the fact that you're walking with Fred, and I've willed to never walk with Fred. So I've got a contradiction in the will there, because I'm willing two things, but both of them can't happen. So let's look at two moral examples that Kant uses. He uses more, but we're going to look at two of them here. So there's the false promising example, and the maxim for that of that action is, I will get money on a false promise whenever I am in need of money and I have no other way of getting it. So the test asks us to consider if we could will without contradiction that everyone do this. So our maxim becomes, everyone will get money on a false promise whenever they are in need of money and have no other way of getting it. Now Kant says that we cannot conceive of this maxim as a universal law, right? So it's guilty of the contradiction in conception. We can't conceive of it, that's the problem. And so let's explain this simply. It can be a little bit confusing explaining why this is the case. So basically, the maxim is about lying to get money. That's basically what it is. But if we lived in a world in which everyone lied to get money, this would also entail everyone knowing that everyone lies to get money. We'll just know that it's human nature to lie to get money. So this would mean that when you lie to get money, you wouldn't actually get any money because everyone would just suspect you of lying to get money. So you couldn't get money by lying. So the maxim is, you can lie to get money, but in such a world, you would never get money by lying. So that's why it's a contradiction in conception. It just can't exist. It just can never happen, right? We can't, whatever we will it just can't happen. It creates a contradiction in conception. So therefore, the maxim is morally wrong. It's morally wrong, therefore, to lie to try and get money. The second example is the example of refraining from helping others. And the maxim of the action says, I will refrain from helping those in need whenever I am in a position to help and despite the fact that I am well off. So basically we're saying, I'm wealthy enough to help others, but I don't think I should, so I'm not going to. If we universalize that maxim, we get everyone will refrain from helping those in need whenever they are in a position to help, and despite the fact that they are well off. Now, Kant says that this non-helping maxim, it passes the first test we were on about, right? It passes the contradiction in conception test, but not the contradiction in the will test, the second one. And this is because rational agents would surely want to be helped whenever they are in need. So they would, as Kant words it, they would adopt the maxim, I will that I be helped whenever I am in need and others are in a position to help me. You know, you'd be an idiot to not want help when you really desperately needed help and someone could clearly help you. Surely you would want them to help you. Therefore, we now have a contradiction because according to Kant, you would be both willing that you be helped when you need it, but also willing that everyone not help others that need it. And you can't will both of those things at the same time. It's like me willing but not willing to walk to my mate to school. It's a contradiction in the will. Now I'm going to finish this video with one interesting counter-argument to a criticism you often hear about Kant's theory, and specifically this part of the theory. So Kant's ethical theory is often criticised with the claim that you could get any maxim to pass the test, to pass the law of nature test, if you made it specific enough. So I could say Colin, 29, from Cornwall, England, can tell a lie for his own advantage whenever he wants to. And critics argue that this would pass the test because I could will it without contradiction. However, the counterpoint to this is that the maxim must be able to be willed as a universal law. Now, something very specific that only applies to me can't be universal. That completely contradicts the definition of universal. Has to be able to be applied universally. So universal laws, they have to be far more general. In other words, it's not possible to universalize very specific maxims, so that criticism isn't valid. So that's the end of this video. So in the next video, we'll look at perfect and imperfect duties, and then we'll go on later to look at the other formulations of the categorical imperative. Thank you for watching. See you next time.